At Kynala Mutual Group, we believe that a brighter financial future should be accessible to everyone. That's really important. Kynala Mutual Group and its foundation has a long-standing history of investing in the community where we have a footprint. Every year, we're averaging at least 9,000, 10,000 volunteer hours that are reported and recorded. But each one of those community members always says to me, with the employees, with the leadership at Kynala Mutual Group, you all authentically show up. The fact that you do support your employees, that shows that you are invested in the community. There is something so special about doing something as a collective whole where you have these shared experiences. It is worth it. Not was, it is worth it.
Our home is the training ground for her dreams policy from American Family Insurance. Insure carefully. Dream fearlessly.
Hi, I'm Kim Sponham, CEO and President of Summit Credit Union. We are so excited to sponsor another Madison 365 Women's Leadership Summit. Women's financial health is especially important to us at Summit Credit Union, and we've focused on it for more than a decade. Women are twice as likely as men to associate negative emotions with their finances, and it's no mystery why. Women still earn less than men for a variety of reasons. Women have less saved for retirement, and they're almost half as likely to invest in the stock market when compared to their male counterparts. But we're also seeing positive signs. There are more female entrepreneurs than ever before, and we know from experience that women with higher levels of financial literacy tend to save more and invest more than their peers. I encourage you to use this conference as an opportunity to improve your own financial literacy and find inspiration in the incredible women joining us today. Thank you for letting us be a part of your journey.
Awesome. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Food Justice from Sovereignty to Security in Wisconsin panel. I'm super excited to be here, and I know we have some awesome panelists. So before we get started, I'm wondering if everyone can just introduce themselves and their connection to food sovereignty. How about we start with Hedi?
Sure. Thanks, Kynala. My name is Hedi Rudd, and I'm the director at Badger Rock Neighborhood Center, and I'm also the deputy director of South Madison programming for Rooted. And Rooted is an organization whose mission is food, land, and learning. We focus on community-based education around urban agriculture and youth education, as well as community education. And I'll tell you more about that as we go on.
Awesome. Shadayra, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Shadayra Kilfoy-Flores. I'm a local entrepreneur and activist, community organizer, and I'm also a garden organizer with Rooted. So.
Awesome. Alex?
Happy Wednesday, everybody. Alex Shade. My pronouns are she and her. I am representing Kynala Mutual Group and its foundation today. I've been with the organization for a little over 3 years. And for those of you who may not be familiar with Kynala Mutual Group, we are a Madison headquartered company that is focused on financial services, insurance, and in a mutual company. Thanks for having me here today.
Awesome. We're happy to have you. And Arvina?
Hi, Hani P, Hochon Karatara, Hamchi Kere, Wiga, Hingaire, Maikare Razdra, Arvina Martin, Wiga, Hingaire. My name is Arvina Martin. I am an enrolled member of the Ho-Chunk Nation, and I've terribly butchered speaking my language, but I love practicing it because I need to make it better. My Ho-Chunk name is Hohamchi Kere Wiga, which means the like the lightning in the distance when it like sparks up and it just makes the sky lit up. That's it. I am currently the executive director of Emerge Wisconsin, which is an organization that trains Democratic women how to run for office. But in my former role as an alder, I was a member of the Food Policy Council, and I also work a lot with the Ho-Chunk Nation and our traditional food preservation, as well as food distribution to tribal members.
Thank you for that beautiful intro. Thank you all for being here. My name is Kynala Phillips, and I'll be moderating this panel today. So to get us started with our first question, whoever wants to take it first, feel free to jump in. But I'm wondering, how have our systems played a part in disconnecting people of color from their food? Go ahead.
I'll start. I think a lot of that has to do with colonization. Just to jump right in there. It has to do with colonization, and it has to do with white supremacy. And particularly like in Madison, and throughout the country and the world, there's been locally redlining, right? And redlining has created food deserts. And so when we talk about things like justice, we're talking about equity. When we talk about like what security means, and what sovereignty means, right? That means being in control. And because of colonization, we have lost that control over what we grow, over how we grow, and basically that means we've lost control over a lot of our food choices because of that. So if anyone wants to dig any deeper.
Yeah, thank you for breaking down the word sovereignty. I think it's a word people who work in food and like food access know a lot about, but everyday people might not actually use that word very frequently. So thank you. Did anybody else want to add? Go ahead.
Hi. So the thing that I think about a great deal is about how we as people of color have been connected to traditional foods specifically that are meant and work with our bodies. It's really depressing to think about the things that happen to Native people just generally, but thinking about how being unable to do the traditional hunting, gathering, foraging that we've done since time immemorial not only impacts our sovereignty and like take our own ability to take care of ourselves, but it actually like affects our health. I know that Native people, and I'm sure other communities as well, get food from the government. We call them commods. I remember my favorite was the grape juice. I also remember stirring up peanut butter, which is also probably better than like Jiffy or whatever, but the foods that are especially for Indigenous people, the foods that are here are medicine. They take care of our bodies. We have to take care of those in order for them to take care of us. And it's historically, again with colonization, God. Colonizers specifically set us all up to be separate from our traditional foods, the foods that make our bodies work. And they gave us fatty, super high fructose corn syrup and sodium laden foods, but we've had to accept those because that's food. And we've not been allowed or have had the option to embrace and either hunt or gather our traditional foods. Like there's been barriers. So, that's a very, very big part of why there's such a huge percentage of Native people in this country who have diabetes. This directly impacts our health. And we are currently in this kind of Native renaissance, I like to say, from like all fields, like media, politics, all of it. But people are really, and especially with the pandemic, have really tried to go back to those traditions and go look for those things, that food, that medicine that our predecessors have relied on for years. And that's that first step back to sovereignty, is understanding that there are things available and we can find them that our people have eaten forever, and those are the things that work for our bodies. I'm sure that there's scientific research, but it's a really big deal for us to reconnect to that, because it not only affects our ability to choose and own our identities, etc., but it also keeps us healthier.
I will say, when I think about this topic, I think about our youth, and I think about myself as a parent. When my work life has been primarily doing racial and social justice work. So coming into Badger Rock and getting involved with food work, I was able to enter it from the lens of working with youth and myself, having grown up in Madison, having, grown up the way that a lot of people of color in Madison have, which is in low income communities where you are segregated from the larger community, where you're probably dependent upon food stamps and school lunch and things like that. So I went to my son's school. He was a student at West High School, and I had to go to a meeting with the principal. And when I walked into the school, I walked in through the cafeteria, and immediately you're hit with fried food. That's what you smell, and that's what you see. And all I saw in the cafeteria were kids of color who were at the, buying fried food for their lunch. And when I walked into the hallway, all along the halls were these groups of predominantly white children eating their meals out of these little bento boxes. And they were lovingly prepared by their parents, their mom or whoever. And they had grapes and carrots and fresh food. And it just hit me right then. I was like, this is wrong. Why are the kids of color eating the greasy food in the cafeteria, and these other kids are eating fresh food? And this is what all kids should be eating, right? So I realized then, and I carried that with me when I started working at Rooted, that there's a component of education, of changing. It's going to take us working with our kids. A lot of us grew up, eating the way that we ate, and as an adult, I want to make those changes too. But I think our greater success is going to be with working with the kids. And we can talk more about how we do that at Rooted. But that's what I think about when I think about the systems that are in place that make that distinction. And you can walk into any school today and see that, for yourself.
Yeah, and I know that we have other questions, but I just want to add on too, that reinforces what all of you have said. I mean, it's an intentional stripping away of our roots, our ancestral roots. And each of us have been stewards of the land, whether we were forced to be because of slavery, or whether it was the land that we might have received or that we saved up to receive, that in the name of progress and industrialization, eminent domain, then stripping us from the land. There's also the stigma that is attached to it. And when I think about other people's stories and them sharing how it was I wasn't exposed to putting my hands in the earth, Alex. I was told to focus on education, get out of my rural community, head to the city, as opposed to embracing that we've all been stewards of this land. And it's our shared land, but it is that intentional stripping away and knowingly separating us and denying us that access to those healthy food options.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody for what you offered. I really appreciate this conversation that you all are having about sovereignty and actually being stewards, because we know people of color have been some of the longest stewards of the land, and yet, still own the least amount of land. And we're going to get more into that later. But I think the conversation that's happening about sovereignty and stewardship, and then Hedi, you mentioned kind of food access and food justice. I'm wondering if you guys can talk about each of those themes, just describing them and then talking about how they're connected. So food justice, food sovereignty, and food security, how are they different? And then how are they interconnected?
Go ahead, Shadayra.
Yeah, I was gonna, so just real, kind of my, our story, like my family's story. I'm Mexican American, and I'm what's called a first generation. And so I'm the first Mexican American in my family born in the United States. But on my European side, we've been here since the 1500s. So I have this very, kind of separated background, right, of colonizers and then being colonized at the same time. And then so I consider myself to be indigenous Chicana, and then my children are Black. Their fathers are Black, so they're Black indigenous Chicanos. And so I've just been very lucky to be really well connected in the community. One day coming into Badger Rock for capoeira classes, and Hedi says, "Hey, are you interested in gardening? I have one plot left." And so 5 years ago, I was really lucky to get the very last plot in the community. I'm also disabled. And so not only has Rooted made access in terms of offering, these plots to families, but then also making them physically accessible, right? Like the fact that it's a raised garden that I don't have to bend down to plant, the fact that it's up off the ground, and then the fact that they offer us seeds, they offer us seedlings, they offer us soil and fertilizer, and along with that, the education. And so that's part of that, making accessibility, making accessible to people has been really important in teaching my children about growing food. And part of what makes, there's that education piece because of it growing from seed to a full plant, and then eventually being able to harvest. So seeing that whole process. And so then also, I'm now a garden organizer, and I teach other moms, other families, how to be able to grow their food as well. And part of what makes that, gives you security and gives you sovereignty is the security means that you're not dependent on the government. You're not dependent on grocery stores or the food chain getting food to you. Instead, we're able to grow some of our own food. And so we're able to take some of that power and that control back over our diets, what we're eating, how we're eating. And then some of the food that we grow, we use for medicine. Like Alex was talking about, I sell natural remedies. I make fire cider, which is an indigenous remedy, because food is medicine. Medicine is made from food quite often. And so the sovereignty part comes in where you're taking that control back, right? Like you're taking more ownership away, and gaining that power over what you eat, how you eat, the things that you grow. And so Rooted has been a wonderful program for us to be involved in. It was years and years ago when we had made a trip to Milwaukee to go and see Growing Power. And that was the first time I had seen like an urban farm. And so the model of empowerment in terms of how growing your own food and how that really, I think for my son, it's really given him, he's 13, he's been growing food with me since he was a toddler. You know, we started with porch basil and porch parsley, and now we've moved on to growing our own squash and our own beans. And for him, he sprouts avocado seeds and mango seeds because he likes to see what all he can grow. So now it's become kind of a way of life for us. And so I just really have appreciated that gift. So thank you, Hedi. And Alex, because, you know, it really has taken a village in a way to help to help him and hopefully more youth understand what that means and the power that growing their own food gives them.
The justice part, and that comes from the land piece in my mind. The fact that many of us don't have access to land. I'm going to hand it over to Arvina because I want her to talk about something in particular. But one thing I want to mention is one group that's not here is the Hmong community. And they are definitely one of the communities that, you know, I think of a lot when I think about people who are continuing their cultural foodways. They're trying so very, very hard to continue to grow their food. Many of them they live in apartments, they don't have access to land. They're growing in small community gardens. Some are quite savvy and they've come to Rooted and gotten, you know, a little bit larger areas of land. But honestly, they should be on larger parcels of land. They should have access to land to grow, to feed their communities, because they are truly still using food in that way. And I know the reason I was pointing or signaling to Arvina as I've been reading about the Menominee Nation and the work that they're doing to bring that back to the Indigenous community, because that's something that got lost. And that's something that we really need to be thinking about when we're thinking about the justice aspect of this. And lastly, on that note, I'll just say in terms of, well, with the Latino community, we know where we are right now. A lot of folks are coming here, they're working the land to even get here. And then whatever happens from there, that's a whole nother story. The Black community, which is a community that's near and dear to me, because like Shady, my children are African-American and I grew up in that community. That's a whole other situation and discussion in terms of how we get people back to the land. And if you go to Love Wisconsin, who I write for, I did a piece, helped Quantice Winters tell her story. And, you know, her story is one that basically is, you know, I felt that I needed to disconnect from the land to deal with the trauma that the land has brought to my family historically, but she found her way back to the land, and that's where she's getting her freedom from. And so I just think we need to be thinking about, when we think about the justice part, the food is definitely important. Eating food that's right for us and good for us and made for us is important, but access to that land, that's where we need to be really starting to look, because it's here. We're in Wisconsin. This is farm country. It's there. Who's going to share it with us? And I'll shut up now.
So you've seen me, or at least the panelists have seen me like writing things down, because I wanted to make sure that I responded and added to these amazing points that folks that these women have brought up already. The first thing that I want to say is our foodways aren't lost. They've been taken from us, all of us. And we still have, there are still people in all of our communities that have that traditional knowledge, and we need to listen to them. And we need to go to them and ask them to help us learn so that we can preserve those ways going forward, because they were absolutely taken from all of us by design. They intended to do that. The structure of the United States has very much been to take that, to strip us of our larger identities and stripping it from every way, whether it's food, whether it's religion, whether it's our home, like our place where we live, all of it. And that's just part of that colonialization. And here I'm smiling, but it's kind of like a smile. To follow up on what Shady said about like medicine, our communities have gone centuries, maybe even thousands of years, using plants or using, things that we've found in nature, whether plant or animal, that has served as medicine. And that gets a lot of kind of like from, say, the establishment. But I firmly believe that science has not caught up to us. They think that our knowledge is primitive. And, oh, well, they just did that placebo effect, whatever. No, they can be science. I truly believe that they can be scientifically proven, the things that we have used traditionally. Science just hasn't cared to look at it, and then because they don't look at it, it gets completely disregarded. Like I think about there was natives who are live within the Arctic Circle, and these elders were like, planet's axis has shifted. It's not the same. It's changed. And everybody's like, whatever, old guy, you don't have a scientific education, you just live here. And then they measured it. And they found that the Earth's axis had actually changed due to an earthquake somewhere. I don't know the specifics, but those elders were right. And they were dismissed. And then science was like, whoops, okay. So we should have a sense of trust. I mean, obviously we should also be, putting into our bodies things we need to like do research, but we need to appreciate the fact that our communities and our people have been doing this for so long. That's pretty good evidence too, even if it hasn't been measured. That's a pretty big deal. I also wanted to talk about how our communities, if we are experiencing financial problems or we need a job, how many of us in our communities have gone to selling food, selling the things from our recipes, whether they are traditional or not. That is a base way for a lot of families to support themselves financially. And it's not a coincidence that a lot of families who or folks who are, recent immigrants go to that in order to provide for their families. And again, that is at the will of people that come to your restaurant who, see that you're having a sale on Facebook and are like, I want your Indian taco, or as I've done, Shady's tamales. They're really good. That's another way, and it's financial, and it's not even necessarily about, feeding ourselves in a specific food way. It's supporting ourselves. The last thing that I want to mention is about the land. And I think that our community should be working with municipalities, with county governments, with the state, and with the federal government about what public land is used for. I have been participating in the Ho Chunk Youth Dugout Canoe paddle that has gone from the top or like the northern end of Lake Mendota. Today we have gone into Lake Kigansa, and this is youth, and in honor of that canoe that was found, that was from circa 800 AD. So we have these youth that are going down and every stop talking about these plants are here. You know, the tree that we used to make this canoe was from the Lunny Lake Farm. And we were able to go there and then talk about all of the plants that are there and how they interact with us. But San Damiano, I think that's how you say it, Park in Monona has a plot specifically designated for the Ho-Chunk Nation to grow traditional foods. And we have our, I guess some people would call it heirloom corn, but like our traditional corn, other things that we have always grown, and now it's growing in this public space. And that needs to be an option for all of our communities. That if you don't have the space, that we can help provide it. That there is all this space, and it can be used to help with the whole, you know, connecting to the foods that are important to us and good for us.
Thank you, everyone, for contributing to that question. We actually have a question from the audience, so I'm just going to go ahead and read it off, and whoever wants to add, feel free to hop in. So someone wants to know, how can policymakers do a better job of taking care of food deserts? It took the city of Madison years to respond to the Allied Drive neighborhood's needs. What can cities and counties do better?
I'll start. You know, it's the question had said, how did the city respond? And the city didn't respond. Actually, it was a family that responded to that. You know, it was the Maldonado family, Joe Maldonado and his wife. They are the ones who opened up Luna Grocery, which is a culturally Latino grocery store.
I got to stop you there real quick and say it was Mariam. Joe helped. I just got to,
yes.
Yeah, I can't
Mariam,
let that go.
yes. So it was Mariam and Joe Maldonado. I couldn't, for a second, her name had escaped me. But that was, you know, it was a family who did that, who put their lives on the line, really financially, put themselves out there. And they also, I know, you know, had been talking about, you know, opening a second store. I'm not sure where things are at with that any longer, but really, it's because of people in the community who have stepped up, not necessarily because the government has, you know, because the city has done that so much, but because individuals have taken that initiative. Same thing with Badger Rock. That wasn't the city of Madison, you know, those were community members. And so I think part of it is funding, right? Then we talk about land, giving the land back, like Arvina was talking about, having this plot in Monona. It shouldn't just be land borrow, it should be actually land give, where the land should be given back to the Ho-Chunk. Land should be given, like Hedi was saying, to Hmong families who are here now as who came here because of being for political asylum, being refugees, and same with the African American, with the Black community. There should be land given. There, that 40 acres and a mule. There are lots of ways that the government could be helping, but particularly giving land back and also subsidizing, making sure that families can open up stores that are culturally relevant to the communities that they serve. So that's, if anybody else would like to take it from there.
Hedi put me on spotlight, so I said that I would happy to also provide a funder's perspective on this. I will say that CUNA Mutual Group and its foundation has a longstanding history investing in organizations and organizations that have a pulse on the community. Let me be clear, who are working to address the systemic and the racial disparities and economic disparities that exist in our communities. The challenge with philanthropy, again, if you want to go back to colonialism and white supremacy culture, is that we still have the power. We still can control purse strings if we want to. We can determine the amount of money, which organizations that we are giving to. I will say that since I have come on board in terms of leading our CSR efforts, which include our foundation, our community relations, other forms of workforce community engagement, so thinking volunteerism, board leadership, subject matter expertise sharing, corporations have a responsibility. We would be lying if we did not acknowledge the roles, whether it be the financial services space, banks, credit unions, have also played a part of upholding this white supremacy culture. We're an 85 plus year strong company, and our foundation is a 53 year strong organization. But I will tell you, over the course of the last 3 years, it's the way that we have chosen to be proximate to the leaders who are running these organizations, listening to the community members. I jokingly say that, yes, I have my people leads, but it's really the community that needs to hold me accountable in the role that I have when it comes to where our investments are going. And when we acknowledge the fact that the South Side, let's just take the South Side. Now, full disclosure, I am not a Madisonian like a lot of the panelists or Wisconsinites, like the panelists. Yes, I am a Wisconsinite now because I pay taxes, but I come from the Midwest. I moved here, I rooted my own family from the Mecca, from the original Chocolate City in Washington, D.C., to take on this job and this work, and it is a vocation. Because we have been denied so much of our oars, the opportunities, the access, and the resources. So when we think about food justice, food sovereignty, security, we don't have that power. We're about giving the power back to the people. We're about walking alongside these organizations. It's about showing up. When they say, Alex, we need you to show up. CSR team, we need you to show up. CUNA Mutual Group, we need you to show up individually, collectively, as a team, as a we. That's what we are doing. And we have been doing that with food pantries here. And I also want to say that even though we're headquartered in Madison, we have a national, international footprint as well. So it's not just here in Wisconsin or Dane County or specific to Madison, but we are investing in those organizations that are focused on what their community has told them they need. So when it comes to culturally relevant, healthy food options, it's exciting that we're supporting the work of Rooted and Badger Rock, Second Harvest, the River Food Pantry. There's a huge announcement forthcoming with a project that we are investing in Iowa that is specific to the food desert in Waterloo, Iowa. I'm getting like the pins and needle shivers right now. It takes all of us, and it also takes acknowledging that we all played a role in upholding this, but we all can play a role in dismantling it.
I would be remiss, I promise to be really fast. I would be remiss if after what Alex was talking about, to not think about our community and our community's leaders. We need to get them, we need to uplift our folks, whether that is to elected office. If you don't like what's happening, please run for office. The government runs best when we have folks with different experiences, because we all have blind spots, every single one of us. And if we have people with like different experiences, those blind spots get smaller and hopefully will get closed. So run for office, encourage someone to run for office, support your community members who are starting organizations like these, or who are doing work like Alex is doing with CUNA. And yes, I just saw Alex's message, vote for the people who hold the coin purse. You know, we absolutely have our voices, and we need to uplift members of our community who are willing to do the work, whether it's at a governmental angle, whether it's at a nonprofit angle, whether it's at a corporation angle, or even like a smaller based, like familial level. We all have our place, and we should be encouraging our community members who share our values to step up, because we're fully capable. We can lead these organizations, and we just need to believe in ourselves and believe in our community members and support them when they are working towards those goals in whatever function or whatever position it might be.
Yeah, I just want to agree with that and say, I'm going to give my age, but I'm 52. And I started doing this work when I was in my 30s. And I thought, oh, you know, I'm going to get involved. I'm going to make some change. And, you know, yesterday we lost a member of our community. And, you know, he had changed how he ate, and he was changing, you know, his life. And he still left us because of, you know, health conditions. And so when I think about Madison, so that question going back, what can the city do? What can the county do? Well, I'm 52 years old. We still only have a radio station that reaches the Black community on Saturday nights, late at night. And primarily that's people from jail listening to that. It's not even our community members. The Black community cannot even turn on the radio and get messaging. The Black community in particular is one that I worry about, because that is the one that is the community that's the most oppressed. And we can point just to the race equity report to know this. There are no restaurants. There are very few. Tonight we have our Badger Rock Community Market, where we'll feature, you know, pop-up chefs, which we've been doing for a while, but there are not brick and mortar businesses. I can't go and have a drink and have other people who I want to be around at the bar with me, or just at a cafe and have music that I want to listen to. And if they do turn it on and too many of us come, they're going to turn it off, you know? So to whoever needs to know, you know, you need to make some changes so that people feel that this is their home and that this is the place that they want to invest in order for those changes to be made. So don't, you know, it starts with food. It starts with all of those things. But if you have an oppressive city that people don't feel a part of, or that they can flourish in, that's a huge part of the problem. And that's why businesses aren't able to flourish and to grow. And so there's something wrong if that can't happen. So look inside at what's the problem. You know, what rules and things are there. And so going back to what Arvina said, we need to elect people that can make those changes. But, you know, if those people get into office and then they just keep it the status quo, that's not helping either. So I hope whoever's on, you know, been elected is listening. You got to get in there. If we're going to work hard to get you in there, you got to work hard to make the changes.
So for people who may not know, Arvina was an alder. And so when she's saying, you know, step up, she stepped up. I'm on the Marquette Neighborhood Association. I'm the only woman of color. I'm the one of the only renters on the Neighborhood Association. And then I'm also the vice chair of the Police Civilian Oversight Board. That was a situation where, you know, we are having to create new systems of accountability, right? Because of police misconduct. That is why we have the Police Civilian Oversight Board. And so in terms of, you know, us coming to the table, sometimes we need to also create our own tables if we're not being invited to those tables. I'd just really like to acknowledge the fact that Badger Rock during the epidemic They had been providing programming where they were providing food, cooking classes, instruction, and their farmer in residence, since they were not able to bring people in to eat, she started teaching online cooking classes, but they also created a food pantry. And for people who were unable to come and pick up their food, they were delivering food to families who had lost accessibility to fresh produce. Same thing with, Francesca Hong. She is now an assembly. She ran for assembly in the middle of the pandemic. She had turned her restaurant, closed her restaurant, and had turned it into basically a soup kitchen. And it was some of the most beautiful, just food in general. But the fact that she was providing this food to people, and it was beautiful, delicious, nutritious food. I know my family, it made us feel appreciated. It made us feel good and healthy. So there are, I think, a lot of ways that we can create accessibility, and a part of, the pandemic has been horrible, but I think the beauty of community support and people supporting one another in the community has been part of the beauty that has come from the pandemic. And so there's lots and lots, I think, of different ways that people can make food more accessible and equitable, right? So thank you, community.
Thank you, Shady.
As a really quick add-on to what Shady was talking about, we also have to take the responsibility to support not only our community of color, but other communities of color. Because whether that is to provide food access, whether that is working and pressing the city, the county, the state, the U.S. government to provide gardening spaces for the Hmong refugees, we all need to do that. We all need to press for that. We all need to support each other. We all need to, pay attention to, say, Black Restaurant Week and note these are Black-owned restaurants that serve food that's amazing. Let's go to there. Let's patronize those. Let's, if we see somebody from a POC community who is like selling food, like Shady with her tamales, buy them. I mean, our communities are, I don't want to say that they're small, but our impact can be huge if we work together. And we have to make sure that we're not talking, or we're not thinking about, certain resources that may be like financial, that may be finite. And if somebody else gets that money, that means you don't. That we have to shut that down. We have to work together. We have to support each other. And all of these things. And also a lot of these food traditions are intertwined. And they're similar. So I just wanted to put that pitch in to make sure that you're supporting organizations, restaurants or businesses that are primarily serve or are owned by folks of color to help promote that and keep those alive and keep those accessible.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for everything that you had to add for that question and just everything. So we don't have that much time left. So this question might be our last, but we'll see. So what I'm wondering is, how important is it to develop programming and opportunities that recognize those culturally specific and systemic reasons for the lack of resources in an area? I mean, we already talked about the Maldonados and how, they went out the way to address an issue in the allied neighborhood. So can you talk about other ways that programs can be developed specifically to address those, whether it be granular to the neighborhood or cultural to a community, and how you all in your work have done that to address those issues and to, attack things from a culturally competent perspective?
Sure. I'll go first with that one. So first, let me shout out to my staff at Badger Rock and to the staff at Rooted at large, because they really do the on the groundwork. Co-creating with the community, I think, is super important. So we can't just come in and say, oh, we know what you want and put it there and hope that they come. We have to actually be there with the community and create programming that responds to them. So when the pandemic happened, at first we were like, what do we do? We're a building and we can't put people in it. And immediately my team, Sarah Carlson, our farm and education manager, Sarah, she was on it. She went online. She started doing her gardening and cooking classes online. And then slowly, as we got a little bit more comfortable, we started to welcome people back to the land in a very safe way. So we went from 12 community garden spots, I believe, to 45. I think we have 50 now, garden spots. And at Badger Rock, these are all pretty much garden spots that are maintained by families of color. So that lets you know that there was a big desire from our people to get to the land and to grow their own food. And Shady was there right along with that, and then we had grown all this food during the school year. So March comes and, the kids had been, getting food in the ground, and Sarah and her team were getting food in the ground. And then we had to take it somewhere. So we, again, created with the community a pantry that worked for the community. The best part, I think, that came from that is then we had youth that needed things to do. And Sarah, because she has that beat with the community, reached out to Briar Patch and the Commonwealth, and she reached out to youth who were former Badger Rock middle school students. And we put the kids to work. They had jobs during that summer, that first summer of the pandemic. And they were able to come and, they were masked up and, being very safe. But at the same time, they were able to see their friends and they were able to work. And now, we're a couple of years out now, and those kids are continuing to come to work at Badger Rock and as high school students, and they're now teaching the classes that we're teaching to the middle school students. So people want to be plugged in. They want to have that space. Tonight we have our Badger Rock market where we'll be selling the produce that the kids have been growing all school year. There'll be youth selling at that market and sharing, the knowledge that they've learned in the summer. We've kicked off the youth employment program again, expanding it to the north side now, and our community programming, which is rooted in culture at Badger Rock. And so those are all programs that we've created with the community. And I think it's just important to listen to the community. The market itself, shout out to Tara Wilhelmi. Tara and another person came to me and said, we need a market, that we can sell at during the winter. And now we do that market as often as we can, in season and out of season when we can. Pandemic without a pandemic in our way, we could be doing a lot more. But so anyway, those are the kind of things that we're doing at Rooted. But I do think that co-creating with the community, listening to the community, and then funders like Alex and Cuna and the other funders who've stepped up to support the work that we've been doing is really important, because we can't do that work without their support and without the community support.
Just to piggyback off of Hedi, Badger Rock had started as an agricultural middle school with a focus on agriculture. And so, the fact that now my son can go there for programming, they're offering camp there, but also the fact that they were offering these cooking classes. It was such a beautiful community space to come into. It was open to families every Tuesday night. Just show up. Sarah kind of liked a heads up, so she had enough ingredients for, but we were anywhere from 2 to 6 families. We would cook together. We had, and prepared meals, and then we ate together. I missed that so much, because we did that for almost 3 years, and now it's going on almost 3 years that we haven't been able to do that. And right now, my son is participating in the MMSD Black Excellence Cooking program, where every week we have fresh produce and the ingredients to make an entire meal delivered to our home, and they're Black chefs who are teaching online and teaching our kids those skills. I wish that we would have had some of these programs. You know, even my daughter, who's now 23, she has not had the same experiences or opportunities that my son, who is 13. He's an amazing cook. She burns soup, you know, so like the you know, the difference between the two of them are night and day. And Badger Rock has also given me that opportunity through their kitchen. I'm a caterer, so I've been able to cater from their kitchen. I've been able to sell my tamales at the different farmers markets. Today I'll be selling Jamaica tea with the kids, and so and I'm also a guest instructor there. They invite me every semester to teach with the students, and so I do a culturally relevant I pick dishes that kids might not normally try, where I'll introduce them to, say, black beans, purple cabbage, asparagus, radishes, things that students normally probably wouldn't have the opportunity to eat. I introduce a lot of those different foods to them. And a lot of times they're real squirmy. I don't know if I want that. And then they're always really surprised how much they like that. Because a lot of times kids haven't had an opportunity to have radishes prepared in a way that they like, or say purple cabbage prepared in a way that they like. And so that has just been a really beautiful opportunity for my son. And now my daughter's actually learning from him, which is kind of funny, where it's the little brother teaching the big sister how to cook and how to, you know, how to do those things, how to grow food. He's teaching her how to grow things now, so.
Hey, I just wanted to really quickly add on to, is that like, when we talk about access and when we talk about showing up, you all are also the people that our young people and people that are my age and even the age strong age need to see. It's that accessibility to each of you. It's also getting their minds to connect the dots with what they're learning in school from an academic perspective. Also from our elders or from the family, those oral histories, those oral traditions, being able to conceptualize it. Again, the opportunity to put your hands in the dirt and to grow, that's putting power back. That is the empowerment piece of it. And then also it's that career readiness. I love listening to the stories of our youth when they said, well, I didn't know that like I could become a chef, or that I could possibly own a food truck, or I could own a restaurant. Having access, that's all about connecting the dots to an opportunity, which in my opinion is what's going to help retain our communities of color and our young people here, so that they don't have to seek quote unquote greener pastures in Milwaukee or Chicago or DC or Atlanta or LA or Houston. That connecting the dots and us investing in their social emotional health, us investing in their education, us investing with helping to further root down and to build and promote community within community, that's where it's all interconnected as well. So thank you for leading.
My dream is to see one of the kids from the middle school take my job. That's my dream. I hope I'm there to see it. I'll be sitting in my little rocker, just, you know, eating some fresh vegetables, saying, thank you, Jesus, we arrived.
And like along those lines, the Ho-Chunk youth that are in that dugout canoe ended up in Lake Lunny Farm or Lunny Lake Farm Park, and pulled up, and we had a meal catered by Elena Terry, who is also Ho-Chunk, and she provided foods to our youth that we've always eaten and that are from here, and that you could find them in the park. where we were. I think that the pandemic and then now even like the supply chain issues have shown all of us how dependent we are on these outside sources. And that has spurred people to consider gardening. How many people did we see like making sourdough on Facebook? And you know, I have no patience for that. But you know what I did go look for mahich for milkweed with my mom, forage so we can have soup later because we like that. You know, that was like a kind of a turning point and like a realization. We need to be able to fend for ourselves, you know, and figuring out what is here and what is around us that can not only feed us like our you know, calories and nutrients and stuff, but also kind of feed your soul. And that whatever that means to you, I'm pretty sure it means different things to different people. And I think that has been a huge change. And I see more native farmers who are growing so many different kinds of corn that, you know, everybody thinks corn is just like sweet corn. No, there are so many different kinds of like hybrids or I don't even know the word to describe it, but folks they're like heirlooms, you know, and we have to protect those, number one, so that they can continue on. But we also need to appreciate that those are here now, and we can use those and we can feed ourselves and not necessarily have to depend so much on the global market, or that there is a global pandemic and we're all sitting there thinking, am I going to have to learn how to hunt? You know, we've got to figure those things out and figure out what works for us. So, and then support our brothers and sisters, you know, who are in of different communities in their journey as well, because that can manifest itself or show up in so many different ways that are appropriate. You know, whatever might be appropriate to me as a Ho-Chunk woman may not be as acceptable to Shady, who is indigenous to, or she's an indigenous Chicana woman. I'm sorry if I got the wrong labels, but you know, like, it doesn't matter, you know, owning that space and owning that thing that is like, I mean, absolutely necessary for us to survive. This is not like something that we can, what's the word I'm thinking of? I've been in the sun for 3 days. It's not a crap. This is the last part, I promise. It's not, yes, also protect our water, because that is also necessary for us. Let's not pollute our largest freshwater source in the world. But food and water, they're not a luxury. That's the word I was looking for. Not a luxury. We all need them. And we all need to figure out how what we have around us can be used to feed us, to keep us hydrated, keep us alive, but also have that spot inside that is, you know, recognizing where it came from and that it's still important now. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you to this amazing panel. You all touched on so many important topics, and I really loved how everyone started to mention youth and how these values and this work can be passed on. So I look forward to the future and everything that you have going on. If you're watching, make sure you take a little snapshot of folks' names so you can get in touch if you do want to get involved, because as we all know, this all takes a village. And so thank you for everyone here. And that concludes our panel. So
thank you.
This is 365 Media.